Welcome to the Esade Innovation Podcast. As you may know, Esade these days is hosting a vertical in TEDx, and this vertical is about technology and education in the Mobile World Congress 4 years from now. So today we will talk about education and technology and how this has been evolved. The following is a conversation with Professor Frank Piller. Professor Frank Piller is from RWTH Business School in the University of Aachen, and he is one of the pioneers in virtual reality, augmented reality in higher education. In fact, he discovered the metaverse well before the people of Meta was thinking that the metaverse existed. So thank you so much and welcome, Professor Piva, and thank you so much for being with Esade and helping us in this podcast.
Yeah, it's my pleasure to be with you. Thanks a lot for the invitation.
Thanks a lot and welcome to the Esade podcast. And we have a list of questions for you. And the first question is about the history of this podcast, online education and so on. During decades, we used the imagination of the students and our imagination to create scenarios through cases. And this has been the method on business school. These cases with the imaginations of the students to create hypothetical situations. MOOCs and Sparks, small private online courses appear and then they change all these and so on. But these days we are thinking about the metaverse and the evolution of the metaverse in all these scenarios. How do you see this evolution from cases and the imagination to making this imagination more real in virtual reality?
Well, I would say in general, it's always complementary, meaning we are always adding another alternative, but still having the old established forms. So for me personally, in 2012, so almost 10 years ago, I got rid of lectures at Aachen. As I said, it's a waste of time to give always the same different students the same kind of lecture. But I use this flipped classroom format. So once, recording all my lectures on videos, giving the lectures, the students via video beforehand, and then using the time in the classroom only for discussions and interactions. And I did it with large classes where I have 1,500 students, to small master level classes with 20 students. And I think it worked perfectly. And then once we had the videos, we said, oh, we can also do it as a MOOC, with edX and other platforms. And again, we saw we can actually use the same videos also for in-house corporate education programs, where we then have perhaps a video setting. So by exploring these technologies, I just thought we have more, abilities to customize the same content to different audiences. And perhaps in the end, the same will happen with the metaverse. I personally discovered the metaverse not in a teaching context, but already back in the mid 2000s, I was on the board of a company in Canada, in Montreal, My Virtual Model. And they were really pioneers in digital twins of humans and had wonderful solutions many, many years too early. They burned more than $100 million, as we all were much too early in this field. But this is when I got exposed to avatars, and this was a high first line of Second Life and so on. But I never really thought about teaching. This just happened more recently. And so this is what I'm now exploring it. It's just another element, in the repertoire of teaching.
Oh, yes. During these years, particularly because of COVID, we all have been exposed and involved in online education, synchronous online education with Zoom, recorded online education with variety of tools and so on. And but you are a pioneer on all these fields.
Mhm.
If you have to compare virtual reality, augmented reality with these more methods that many of
Mhm.
us discovered because of COVID, and not you,
Yeah.
but all the others discovered. What do you think are the main differences between these methods?
I would say it's very different. So for me, teaching, and we'll probably talk more about this, what I do in detail later on. But for me, teaching in virtual reality in the metaverse is really not, I would compare it to classroom teaching, in-person classroom teaching. I would not compare it to an online class. And for me, doing something in the metaverse is much closer to doing something in classroom than what you would do in an online deliverable, on a MOOC or with teaching videos and so on. And and this is probably what is evolving in my landscape. So we have these in-person interactions, and they can be very rich discussions, very interactive things that we have either in a classroom, in a hotel room, or in the metaverse. Or you have these totally self-paced online classes, where they're perfect to deliver content, to deliver skills, competences, and so on, but self-paced online learning, perhaps with peer-to-peer interactions. And then we'll probably have something in between, like what we now do in Zoom, that we have live meetings in Zoom with a larger group. But somehow the later here, just live teaching in Zoom, or even worse in Teams, or not so good platforms, this is somehow something in between. And then, of course, we have to think, when we go, to these really rich interactions, what we normally do in class, do we really have to travel, or can we do it in the metaverse in a VR environment?
Oh yeah, that's fantastic. Frankly, it was a surprise in the recent weeks and so on, because we all were surprised by a PwC study with PricewaterhouseCoopers that were comparing virtual reality. Now we call it the metaverse and avatars and so on,
Mhm.
with traditional training, and the results were fantastic. They found that it's 4 times faster in terms of effectiveness of training, particularly to in-class education, but 2 times faster than online education, 4 times more focus. And this is engagement is our big
Mhm.
problem in classes, particularly with these new generations
Yes.
that have so many screens, so many screens everywhere, small screens, larger screens, medium screens, so many screens. And
Mhm.
then that it was even more surprising, because it was 4 times more emotionally connected students that with traditional in classroom experiences and so on. Uh, what do you think? Is the metaverse the future of education?
Well, it definitely is one future, one of many futures. If I consider the numbers you just shared, I don't know if it's so strong 4 times, but I really can agree for it. So perhaps let's share a little bit with the audience what I'm doing basically in VR. In the moment, I use it for executive professional education classes, and this is a class which I am an open enrollment class. Is typical for business models, for business schools. In my case, one on Industry 4.0, the other on intelligent engineering, so digitalization of the innovation process and the engineering process. And before Corona, we got people for 3 4 days in a nice hotel, or on campus in our executive teaching rooms. And we had rich interactions, lectures, group talks, company visits, factory of the future visits, and so on. And now we change this to virtual reality, and we meet with these people over a week, 5 hours a day in virtual reality. Before, these people get an Oculus Quest to their home, they get like half an hour of onboarding, that they know how to bring this headset into their home or office Wi-Fi and to operate it. And then we really do the teaching more or less there. And here, and so we really are 25 hours in virtual reality over course of a week. And here I learned exactly what I could see in this PwC study, that first, on the feedback day, they all tell us, traditionally, they tell, oh, the content was great. Now they often tell us, wow, this was like a spa. As I really had to focus on one thing. As the biggest advantage of virtual reality is you don't have a second screen. You can't multitask. You really have to focus, on that one issue. And this actually is very, very demanding. So therefore, after 1 hour, we always have to give people a break and say, take a screen break, look outside the window, do a short walk, to relax your eyes. But you really have to be focused. Then also the way how you present slides in that it really works with today's technology. You really need 40-point text font, very thick lines, meaning you really have to reduce your content. And this forced me as a professor to really think about the essence, of my trainings, of my lectures. And I think it really helped us to give, in the end, the same message in really a much more focused time. And what we also learned is this emotional connect. And there are different platforms we use. We have one platform, the one I'm using mainly. All the students, the participants are generic avatars. They all look the same. You can change your color, and on top of your virtual avatar head is your name and your company of affiliation. And actually, this is great as this is reducing all the biases. Everyone is the same. We don't think, oh, this person looks a little bit strange. I don't trust her or him, And you have this shared experiences. And even if they all are these basic avatars, it's really totally amazing still for me after being hundreds of hours in VR, how easily people connect to each other. You have these 4 people in a virtual breakout room, and they really work very closely together, perhaps even better as if they would be in a breakout room, in a business school. And so they have it. We have other teaching platforms where we really have avatars that are the people who are scanned, and they really look alive in the real. And also this works, but probably more in a corporate context, in an in-house situation where you would like to see your colleagues, the CEO of your company as they look in real. But I totally can underline it. It's definitely faster as you have to be more focused. You are more focused as you don't have a second screen. And I also think you are 100% more emotional connected than whatever you do in Zoom, in traditional online, where you just see people in 2D in a small stamp, and that's all the interaction. Probably still the metaverse cannot substitute, the beer or the wine in the evening, what we normally have, where you also probably can connect to people. This still perhaps, but also for luck is not possible yet.
When we think about AI and VR and so on, we always think about engineering. We always imagine this picture of you look at the machine and then you have your iPad or your smartphone and so on, and then it sees what is inside the machine and what are the processes that are running. And of course, it's a motor of it's impossible to see that in real life. Or we think of medicine and you can see the human body and the different parts of the human body, things that you cannot do. So many times for us, things like engineering, it's pretty clear. But then we go to technology, things that are more abstract, like programming, math, and it seems more complicated. And finally, we go to executive education and we talk about the strategy, digital strategy. Everything is abstract. And how do you see the difference, and how do you manage these different levels of abstractions that you go?
Yeah, it's a very good question. Let me share the experience not of myself, but of a close colleague, Harry Nacken. He is doing a lot of VR here at Aachen University, and he's a civil engineer. And he pioneered this, and he's teaching, his students on water treatment and, doing waterways. And some of his classes are also, how you call it in English, if there's a flooding, and then these engineers, water engineers, have to react on a flooding. So, and he said, well, we really can have to use VR for physical training. So people, the students are in VR and they learn how to build these, emergency measures, barriers against the water and so on. But then he realized for my water engineers, civil engineers, their biggest problem later when they start working is actually not managing the water, but is managing the people. And then he said, for the engineers, perhaps the best way in VR is that they can learn how to, talk to citizens. As this is what these engineers also have to do. If there's a flooding coming, they have to go to a village and convince everyone to leave their house. And the people don't want to leave their house, as they don't see the emergency. And this is where he now told me actually the VR is most effective is he can simulate angry citizens. And the students can do in a very safe environment, really learn, how it is to have this debate with an angry crowd of citizens. And we have our own teaching platform for VR at the university, and you can really set up as the coach, the level of annoyance. And at one point, the citizens throw you virtual tomatoes and so on, really get angry. And sometimes they are more this. So you have really great way. And see, I think that's a great example. He started in very practical engineering teaching, but then realized the real strength is to simulate angry citizens in a role play.
That's fascinating. That's very, very, very great. So we see that online education, particularly in executive education, is conquering the world. And now the metaverse, with all this experience of virtual reality and so on, seem to be clearly much better for many situations. Probably not all situations, or maybe not all situations, but for many, they look like much better. What is left in the future for face-to-face education? Is there anything left, or we will be all of us avatars anytime soon?
Well, so I would say we have different kind of executive education programs. So for the ones I just mentioned earlier, I see this actually working very well in the metaverse. As in the moment, we just use virtual classrooms, for these kind of interactions. But I see in the next 1 or 2 years, we will have virtual factories. And the factory tour we normally did, by going to BMW or Porsche or Audi and getting really a VIP treatment with a plant director walking through the plant. I think in 1 or 2 years, we can do this actually in a virtual world. And then you not just could observe the plant, but actually you can mess around with it. I think we have many, many ideas, and this is not realized yet, but I see a lot to come. And then actually, in my bachelor class, in my bachelor level students, they all, at the first year bachelor students of my class, already today, and actually since 7 years, the teaching is delivered in a serious game. So the students manage a car manufacturing company in this typical traditional online situations, but they are the manager of their own car company. They compete with hundreds of other students in who has the best car company. And then whenever they have to do something that they don't know, they get the teaching video, to solve the task. And I see this also on a much higher level for executives, that perhaps actually a real metaverse class is not just a virtual classroom with avatars, but actually you get a trial factory. You have to really do the task. You have a development task. And while you're doing it, perhaps with a group of peers, you learn also the content. But then what's left for face-to-face? I would say for longer programs like executive MBAs, full-time MBAs, these face-to-face brings a strong other element. As for these kind of programs, probably, if we are honest, what we as professors teach is at least, if maximum 50% of the value. 50% there of the value comes from the network, the exchange, the informal exchange of these students in the socials, at sports, and so on. And I think this we can't replace with the metaverse. So for these longer programs, I think where we all moved out to blended, but we definitely will bring people back to the campuses face to face, but then not waste the time when people here face to face with lectures, but really with stronger interactions, and also interactions which are not scripted, by templates and break exercises, but where really students have the room to co-create something together on your own pace, and really on their own topics.
Yeah, that's great. One of the things that is interesting in all these phenomena is the evolution of the role of the professor. In the beginning, we professors were managing discussions, lecturing. This was the main role of the professors. Now, with the COVID and the pandemics, and a bit before, and with the MOOCs and so on, we become content creators. And this is a completely different skills because you know how to manage with
Mhm.
cameras, you know how to manage how to produce videos, you know how to produce all these kind of things that we never did before. We were basically writing things, talking, and now the interaction is a completely different level. Now it comes VR and artificial reality and so on. How do you see the change in the capacity of professors to adapt to this new world?
Well, I think first of all, we really need to be in larger teams. As all what I do in VR, I'm not an expert of VR, but behind me, I have in all cases a great team, a great of team of the on the leadership network platform where I do executive trainings, a great team on the side of RWTH, where we have 15 people full time working on these digital teaching environments, and they support me and they are open to my input, but I really have to trust them as I never have the time, the capabilities to do this. Actually, teaching in VR was amazingly simple. And I think, and the good thing is, and you still need the good skills. If you were a bad teacher in the classroom, you're also a bad teacher in VR. You can't hide, as the avatar is really mimicking what you normally do in a physical space and the way how you build it. Well, probably I had to learn to rearrange my slides, really do this, but perhaps I really learned from doing this in VR also to improve my teaching in the classroom. As probably also there now I know to be more focused, and don't to overload the students with content. So therefore, I would say this is probably the big mandate for business schools, the administrators, that they really see in their staffing, that a great class, a flagship class, is really even more than today managed not just by a professor and perhaps a teaching assistant, but really by a team. And you have a producer of the digital content, and this person is as important as a professor.
One of, one of the things that all this technology changed a lot is the economics behind
Mhm.
universities. The economics in two sense. On one hand, the capacity to use these technologies many times are not cheap. Also, the skills needed for the professors and the skills to reskilling the professor and so on is not cheap. But on the other sense, the capacity to reach students. I mean, now you are more like Google or like Meta, Facebook, and so on, Amazon, and so on. You can reach hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands, even millions of students with a single platform by the MOOCs and so on. So the whole economic changed a lot. Look at MIT and all these online courses that they are doing, and they're distilling some of the people that then bring to other courses and so on. Uh, so the change in the economics changed a lot for universities. What do you think? This the small universities, small business schools will survive all this tremendous amount of change that they face, and particularly the economics behind these changes.
Mhm. Yeah, it's a very interesting question, and I think there's, as you said, there are so many different kinds of universities. Where I am here at Aachen, we are a dinosaur of German engineering. 50,000 students, but basically, even with 50,000 students, we are basically a research university. And most of the professors here are here for do research, and we have a very great research infrastructure. And for many years, teaching was something you did on the side and no one paid too much attention. We learned really over the last decades that teaching is important, and invested a lot in this, and also before Corona into these digital formats. But we are a state university, and the money we get from the state, which is about a third of our budget, is really depending on the number of graduates we produce. And here, actually, our chancellor, who is in charge of the economics, realized if the government realizes how efficient online teaching is, they don't have to fund all the universities. And so, as a clever manager, he says, I have to make sure that we have reasons to exist to get this funding. And so the future of our bachelor education is seen as entirely project based. So we are really actually reinventing the reason why students should come, in physical presence to Aachen. And we get the funding for this from the government. As we say, instead of putting you in lectures, you really have a much more action oriented learning. And from the beginning, you work in real, projects with companies, with societies, and so on, and to somehow reinvent our existing business model. However, I totally agree that we have huge opportunities also to reach other audience. And it's a little bit the story we had when MOOCs came up, but to my knowledge, no MOOC put any existing university out of business. On the contrary, in my innovation management MOOCs on edX, I have about 10,000 students every year. But these are all additional people we engage with. They never would have come to Aachen, to sit in one of my normal master lectures. But these are additional people we now reach. And they not do it as a substitute to a university degree, but most of them do it on the job as one they really would like to have a very specific input. However, of these 10,000 plus, only very few actually do the exam, many of them drop out. So, but still, the first that joined, they all got some ideas and then they decide perhaps it's not for me. So, but it's a very, very different market here, which I think is super great, as we all agree that this world needs more, knowledge and skills and education. And therefore, I'm very, very positive that this is just additional, However, that it within the economics of a university, we definitely have to put teaching and infrastructure for teaching on higher priority, as it used at least to be for a research university as Aachen in the past. As you have to be on that game. As what I said earlier, you don't get VR teaching for free. You really have to invest into this and learn how to do it.
Well, thank you so much. I don't know if there is there anything that I didn't ask that I should have been asked, or is anything that you want to add to this conversation?
Well, I think no, I think you asked a lot of things. It was a great conversation. I'm just thinking on it. What I would just, I don't know actually who all is in the audience here, but my message to is, even if I ended perhaps a little bit differently by saying you have to invest to it in professionally, the good thing with all of this is you can experience it and practice it very, very cheaply. An Oculus 2 VR headset is less than $500, and it has much larger capacity than a high-end, headset just a couple of years ago. And I think the good thing with all of these things, you can just try it out. You very quickly do a minimum viable product. So I would just say really experiment, as this is what I did, when we did the first flipped classroom, was one of the first in Germany. We just did it with, one of my PhD students who was good in holding a camera, and we produced it. Now we have this big professional studio and professional camera people, but we started very, very frugal. And I think this is a great thing at this new world that's coming up. You can reuse a lot of the platforms. You even just go to Spatial, or one of these for free available VR rooms to try it out. This is what I now do with my PhD students. We have our seminar in Spatial, as we just wanted to change to the other Zoom meeting. And this has no cost, and all of your students are happy if you give them an Oculus, on your budget, as you saved all your travel budget for the conferences this year, so they all can get an Oculus. So this is just what I would encourage, everyone who's listening to this podcast, just give it a try, and it's really much more there. And if you want to do it on a high level, like at Esade, where you really have a very high demand on the execution, you have to invest. But just to give it a try, you can do it really very frugally and experimentally.
That was wonderful. Thank you very much, Frank. Das war's. Total wunderbar. Vielen Dank. Frank.
Yes, sure. Thanks for the invitation.
Thank you so much, and thank you very much to you all for listening to this podcast. The metaverse and a new phase in education is coming, and this will affect all of us. Thank you very much again.